Hey everyone, welcome. I'm so excited to be here today. I'm Durenda Wilson, and I am going to be a featured speaker at MPE Home Educators. It's the MPE Homeschool Conference. And I'm excited to be here tonight because I'm going to be just sharing with you a little bit more about myself and some of the things that I'll be talking about at the conference and just getting to know you, answering questions, doing a book giveaway. So I hope you'll join us today as I say we because my little sidekick, she's over here. I don't even know how to say her name. Is it Shanksy? I don't even know. Anyway, she's helped get me set up so that I could be here with you tonight. And there she is. Hey, I want to make sure you can hear me. Can everybody hear me? That's the biggest thing right there. Can y'all hear me? Is my microphone working? I think I should probably check that first before I start talking. So let me know. And as you're getting on, would you let me know? Great. Yay, you can hear me. As you're getting on, wherever you're listening from, why don't you go ahead and put in the comments where you're listening from, and that'll automatically enter you in the book giveaway that we're going to do in this particular live session. So I'm excited to be here today because I get to let you get to know me a little bit better before I'm at the conference and I get to meet you in person. I hope all of you who are listening are signing up for the conference. Hey, Gina. Gina's here from Kansas. Wow. From what I understand, Kansas City, Missouri, and Kansas City, Kansas are not very far from each other. All right. Courtney is here from Lawrence, Kansas. So looks like it kind of converges. Like there's Missouri people and there's Kansas people coming in and listening, and hopefully we'll be at the conference as well. I'm excited. I'm going to be there with my husband. I'm going to be doing 6 sessions there, and he is going to be at the table with my books, and we'll both be available for families to listen or to talk to us and just ask us any questions that you have. That's what we're there for. We are there to encourage you, to inspire you, just to know that you can do this homeschooling thing. So I'm going to start out introducing myself as you sort of get going on this Facebook Live. My name is Durenda, and last name is Wilson. That's kind of important. But I am married to Darryl. We have been married for 33 years, and we have 8 kids, ages 32 down to 18. 5 of them are boys, and we have graduated 7 so far. We have 1 left who's still at home, homeschooling. So we've been doing this a really long time. We have homeschooled all of our kids from the beginning, so we're in somewhere around our 28th year. I never know whether to count the preschool years as well because, you know, we're technically homeschooling then as well because we're educating our kids all the time, right? As we're going through life with them and teaching them how to talk and walk. These are things we naturally do. And somehow when we get to the part about learning how to read, we kind of get nervous and think that someone else needs to do it. But it's really so natural for us as parents to teach our kids. And I think that's what a lot of parents need to understand. Like your love for your children is deep and wide. You love them more than anyone. You're more committed to them than anyone else. You care more about their future than anyone else. So why wouldn't you be the best one to facilitate their education? So I am really glad that you're here tonight. Some of you might know me from the books that I've written. I wrote the Unhurried Homeschooler it was in 2016 that it came out, and it's what we call a simple, mercifully short book on homeschooling, because when you decide to homeschool, or if you're feeling overwhelmed by homeschooling, or you've just sort of lost your just sort of your joy in homeschooling, it's so good to be reminded of why you're doing what you're doing. And so the Unhurried Homeschooler helps parents sort of just revisit the whys and just the very basic things, and just encourages you to that you can do this, that especially if you're starting from the very beginning, you don't have to rush into book work right away. You can take your time and just sort of gently ease into book work. I think this is something that some parents don't understand. They think they have to hit the books really hard right away in kindergarten and first grade, and And that's so not the case. And so I talk about that in the Unhurried Homeschooler. And then I also wrote the 4-hour school day. And some people think I'm going to explain how to do homeschooling in 4 hours a day. And really, it's the why it doesn't have to take more than 4 hours. And 4 hours is for the high schoolers, not the little ones. Kindergarten, first grade, I think we spent maybe 0 to 30 minutes on any kind of book work, and the rest was just living life together. And I talk about how important family life is in terms of all the things that it teaches our kids. And I think this is something we sometimes underestimate. So I really expound on that in the 4-hour school day and share lots of stories. And I think it's so important to hear other people's stories because it helps inspire us and make us realize that we actually can do this. And so that's really my heart's desire in writing my books and in talking on my podcast. I just want parents to understand that you can do this. You are absolutely qualified to do this. Like I said, you are the expert in your child because, they say that when they determine and when someone's an expert at something, it means that they have spent 10,000 hours or more doing that thing. Well, by the time your child is 6 years old, you have spent 13,000 hours with them. So, or 16,000 hours with them. So by the time they're in kindergarten, it's around 13,000. So you have more than qualified as an expert in your child. And so I just love to encourage parents and remind them that it doesn't have to look like traditional school, that we have so much freedom when it comes to homeschooling. We can just do things the way it works for our families and have confidence that our kids are going to have a rich and full education. Family life is incredible. I think it's one of the greatest benefits that we saw in homeschooling our kids was just the amount of time that we were able to spend as a family and, encouraging those sibling relationships. And now they're adults and they all have good relationships with each other. They love to get together. And so it's one of those things that goes beyond the homeschooling years. And then it's also just a great opportunity as we're raising our kids together. We're teaching them so much about communication, what healthy relationships look like, and navigating conflict and how to resolve conflict well. And so it's just, there's just so much beauty in the homeschooling journey, but it can be intimidating when you first start out. And so that's why I want to be here to encourage you all, answer questions that you might have. And I think I'm going to start out just by explaining kind of why we ended up homeschooling, because I think people are curious to know, like, what made you decide to do this? Because this was back in the 90s. And so I'm going to tell that story in just a minute, but I'm going to look over here in the comments and see here's Gina said she loved the book, The 4-Hour School Day, one of the first 3 books she read when she decided to homeschool. And which she said she will start in the fall. Congratulations. That is awesome. I am so excited for you and your family. All right, so I'm going to explain why we started to homeschool. So back when I was a teenager, I somehow ran across a book at a yard sale, believe it or not. It was called Better Late Than Early. I don't know why I picked it up. I'm sure it was the Lord, completely Him. And I read through that book as a teen or young adult, and I remember thinking to myself, this makes so much sense. And this book was by Raymond and Dorothy Moore, and they were what they call the grandmother and grandfather of homeschooling back in the 80s. Now, we know that homeschooling was the norm 150 years ago, right? So really the traditional, what we call the traditional conventional school system we see right now is the experiment, not homeschooling. Homeschooling has proven to be a really great thing for hundreds of years. But anyway, but because it was making a little bit of a resurgence back, and this couple was homeschooling their kids in the 70s, and I think it was the 70s and early 80s. They were actually writing the books in the 80s. So, somewhere in the 70s, they were raising their kids and homeschooling them. And so they started writing about this in the 80s, and I picked up that book and I read it. I thought, this is this so, you know how when you read a good book, it articulates exactly what is in your heart about something. And that's what I felt like when I was reading this book. And I also met a family that was homeschooling, which is a rare thing back then, back in the 80s. And I loved their family. Like, I know you guys are going to laugh, but their kids were so sociable. They were, and I wasn't expecting unsociable kids because there wasn't that, what do you call it? You know, just kind of like people think that generic version. People automatically think, oh, if they're homeschooled, they're not sociable. And I didn't even have that thought because I didn't know that much about homeschooling. All I know is I met these kids and they were funny and they were bright and they were very, each one was very much their own personality. There was not this trying to be like each other kind of thing or like their peers. They were just very much individuals. And I just loved what I saw. And I thought, wow, if this is, what homeschooling looks like and feels like, this is what I want to do. And so fast forward, I met my husband. Fortunately, when we decided to get married and we're talking about homeschooling, his brother was already, and wife were already homeschooling their son because he was having some trouble in school and he was only in first grade, but just trouble focusing, that kind of thing. And so they decided to homeschool him. And so it wasn't a complete like, well, that's weird, I don't want to do that. My husband was like, yeah, we should totally do that. And then as we talked about it more, we talked more about the reasons we wanted to homeschool. Like, we didn't really want to send our kids away and share them with someone else for that many hours a day, that many days a week. So we're like, yeah, that was just more affirming that we wanted to be with them. And we're like, well, and the Bible says we're supposed to like disciple them. And when I look at discipleship, it looks like spending a lot of time with the person that you're discipling and them spending a lot of time with you and having a hard time reconciling how that's going to work if our kids are gone all the time. And so those were kind of like the reasons we went into homeschooling and decided to do that from the very beginning. And so, it's not something we actually ever questioned again once we made the decision. And so it has been one of the single best decisions our family has ever made. And so I am excited to be able to be at the conference and to be able to share the things that I've learned along the way. And I am going to just let you know some of the topics that I'll be talking about. I'm going to be talking about preparing your mom heart for the post-homeschool years, because I know some of you out there are looking at, the end is kind of in sight, and you're wondering like what's going to happen after we're done homeschooling, because when you pour your heart and your soul and everything into homeschooling your kids, it does make you wonder what's it going to look like when we're not doing that anymore. So okay, someone's saying it's hard to hear me. Is everybody having that same experience? Because I can try to turn it up a little bit. Is that better? Let me see if I don't think I can adjust this at all. Wait, maybe I can. Hang on just a second. I don't know if that was my input or output. Is it any better now? Let me know, and I will try to make adjustments. I can pull out my mic if I need to. Okay. All right. Somebody says muffled, and someone says I can hear you great. I don't know what's happening. All right. Well, let me know if there's, if it clears up or doesn't clear up. We'll see what we can do. All right. So I'll be talking about preparing your mom heart for the post homeschool years. Also, while I'm sharing, if you guys have questions you want to ask me, feel free to put them in the comments, and I will try to answer them before this live session is over. The second thing I'm going to be talking about is building resilience in your kids. And so resilience would be something like grit. I don't know if you've noticed, but it's kind of something that's lacking in the current generation that's out in the workforce. I'm seeing it. I know a lot of employers are seeing it. It's this ability to really persevere and stick with something, to set a goal and to be able to meet it, to be able to bounce back from failure and understand that failure plays a great part in helping us to grow and learn. And so I'm going to be talking about what it looks like, what resilience is, and what it looks like to be building it in your kids, and give you actual real life examples. I'll also be talking about sustainable homeschooling. So we all know that when um, when we start homeschooling, it can be easy to overload ourselves trying to do too much, and we realize that our plan is not sustainable. And so I'm going to talk about basically the importance of creating a sustainable homeschooling plan and just kind of ways to do that. So that's another topic I'll be talking about. And then the sky's the limit. I'm going to be talking about homeschooling high school, because that's always a big question. A lot of parents are like, I can do this, but only till high school. Then it's too intimidating. I can't do it. My thought on that is, you made this investment, you poured into your child, and you've grown with them. So why not move into high school with them and just continue to grow alongside one another? Get the information that you need. Also understand that high school can look, the ways that our kids can earn credits can be so vast and varied when we're homeschooling. And so I talk about that and why that's also important, because the high school years can be a wonderful time for our kids to explore all different options, but under the umbrella of our, just walking alongside of them and discipling them and counseling them, but then also letting them make decisions. And so that's a really fun topic to talk about. I'm also going to be talking about nurturing sibling relationships. A lot of us don't realize when we decide to homeschool how much time we're going to spend dealing with arguments and fights amongst our kids, but learning to recognize that it's an opportunity is key in all of it. So I talk about conflict and resolving conflict and how we can help our kids bond more, and how that looked for our family. And then I'm also going to talk about chores, why they are essential in homeschooling. So much more a part of our kids' education than you would ever guess. It also helps keep our homes and our yards in order as well. And so there are so many reasons to have kids doing chores. And so I talk about that in that session. Oh, yes, thank you for sharing. I was just going to answer that question about my books. I didn't mention Unhurried Grace for Mom's Heart. That is a devotional that I wrote specifically for homeschool moms, just sort of helping you apply passages of scripture to motherhood and to homeschooling, just some things that the Lord showed me over the years. And so Gina's asking, could you touch on your Unhurried mentoring course? Is it an extension of your books, or does it dive into other topics? Okay, well, the mentoring course, basically I go through in more detail what it looks like to take a more unhurried approach to homeschooling. And I cover kindergarten through 12th grade. And so, because a lot of people are like, yeah, I understand the simple unhurried approach in the early years, but what does that look like as they get into high school? Are they going to be able to earn enough credits by, kind of taking this approach? And yes, they absolutely can. And so I talk about what that looks like. And it's fun because I can share more of our experiences and also give some really good resources that we use that were super helpful to help us keep that simple, unhurried approach while also giving our kids a rich, full education and doing it in a way that worked for them. And so that's sort of the nuts and bolts of that mentoring course. And so you can find that at the unhurriedhomeschooler.thinkific.com. So I am curious if anybody has any questions that you want to ask. I'm happy to answer those. I'm really excited to be part of the conference. I really want parents to leave the conference feeling confident and inspired and challenged, that you all can give your kids a rich and full education. So there's Ashley. Hi, Ashley. Courtney. Great to see you guys here. Let's see if there's any more questions. Yay. Okay, I'm just looking through here real quick. All right, just making sure I'm not missing anything. Can you share about homeschooling during times of crisis? Yes, absolutely. Like sudden health issues, financial difficulties, etc. Okay, Stacy, I'm speaking at the conference at the end of this month. I don't have the schedule in front of me, what times I am, but I think if you get on the website, that might be there. All right. So, homeschooling during a crisis. I have a podcast episode where I talk about this because our family has been through several crises as we were in the midst of homeschooling. And what I found was that the best thing to do for us was to go back to what I would call a skeleton schedule with our kids. So we might be doing a little bit of schoolwork. It just depended on the situation. There were times we just dropped schoolwork altogether and we just navigated our days very slowly. We had a rhythm because I think it's super important for kids to continue to have a routine even in the midst of grieving, in the midst of having a lot going on. So I'll give you an example. When our youngest son was born with a major heart defect, he needed open heart surgery at 3 days old, and he was in the hospital for 2 full months, and we had 7 kids at home. We lived an hour away from the hospital. So that was not a time that I needed to be concerned about homeschooling. Hang on just a second. Sorry. I've got a cold and my throat's drying up here. Let me take a drink real quick. And so one of the things that happened, we did not know he was going to have this heart defect. We had no idea until after he was born. So we had nothing in place, nothing ready, no childcare ready, nothing. So the first thing my husband said was, we need to come up, because they told us he could be in there 3 weeks, it could be longer. They had no way of knowing how long it would be, and we had no idea it would be 2 full months. So my husband said, we need to come up with a routine that we can live with somewhat long term. And so we came up with this plan, excuse me, came up with a plan that I would be home in the mornings with the other kids, and I would call into the hospital and get a report from the nurses, but I spent the morning with the kids. And then when it got to be lunchtime, they typically ate lunch, and then they went down for naps, most of them, or quiet times, and then had self-directed play in the afternoon. So it wasn't a time I had to be there. So I spent that time at the hospital. I would drive to the hospital at lunchtime and spend the rest of the day with our son, Silas, and then try to be back home by dinner time and have a normal dinner and evening with everybody. Now, sometimes Silas wasn't doing well and I needed to stay longer, but my husband was working at home at the time. He still needed to work, but he mainly worked in the mornings, so that worked well. And then our church came in and provided some childcare in the afternoons if needed, and also provided some meals. So the Lord completely provided for us, and our kids got to see that. They got to see the body of Christ come alongside of us and help meet those needs. And so those kinds of lessons they're just as important as the math lessons, sometimes more important. So I didn't worry about much in the way of schoolwork. I would read out loud to them. We would just kind of keep some sort of rhythm where they felt secure and able to maybe stop and talk to me about the things that they were worried about, or because they were young and little children have a hard time knowing how to express their feelings. And so we really have to give them a lot of opportunity, just time and space and permission, and ask questions. And so I feel like when we're going through a crisis, it's a beautiful time for us to bond together as a family and to bring our kids back to our roots of faith and talk about how faith ties into these difficult times that we're experiencing. And these are the times when we truly, truly get an amazing opportunity to disciple our kids. And we don't have to worry as much about schoolwork because we can know that God is sovereign over our lives and He's allowed whatever is going on to be going on, and we need to ask for wisdom to know how to walk through it well with our kids. So that particular year, our son was born the beginning of September. I don't think we started back into any kind of schoolwork. He came home in November, And I think we may have started back into actual schoolwork maybe in January. So those kids, 4 months, it was 4 months of no real formal school. They went to a co-op once a week, but that was just mainly fun things. So, and it didn't affect their education in the least. And so I think this is so important for us to understand that these times that we live with our families are just as much, if not more, a part of our kids' education as the math and the reading and the writing and all of that. So, all right. Are there any? Okay, so, all right, great. She shared the link to when I'll be speaking at the event at the end of the month. Are there any other questions? You mentioned financial difficulties. This is something that I think sometimes it can be interesting to navigate because we wanted to be honest with our kids. Like, it's okay for them to know that we're struggling financially in terms of like, listen, we can't just buy whatever, whenever. We need to be wise with what God's given us because right now it's limited and we want to make sure that we're making good decisions. All of that is teaching our kids discernment. It's teaching our kids that, hey, this is part of life. Sometimes we go through financial difficulties and this is how we navigate it. So we're modeling for our kids how to navigate life crises, death, grief, financial difficulties and those kinds of things without overburdening them. And we just pray for wisdom from the Lord, just discernment to know how to walk that out. But it is a very much an important part of their education. All right, let's see if there are any more questions. How have co-ops helped you in homeschooling? Are there things you look for in picking one? Okay, yes, absolutely. We actually ended up in one for 12 years. It was meeting our needs, and every year we prayed about it, and we asked the Lord, do you want us to continue to do this particular program? And every year we'd get the thumbs up, yes, do it again. So we did. But I would say look for, you don't have to be on the exact same page as everyone else, but I would say look for commonalities with the people that you're going to a co-op with. So I would obviously look for one where faith was a part of the co-op. And I would say, look for ones that have things that your kids are actually interested in. Hopefully you'll have a connection already to the co-op if you found out about it from someone else and it's someone that you enjoy. I would say, yeah, there's so many different great ones out there. I mean, some of them are just mostly like outdoors. And if you want to get your kids outside, like what are the things that you feel like you're struggling to be able to give your kids? Like for me, I could give my kids lots of outdoor time. So that wasn't something I would be looking for in a co-op. But maybe you live in the city and you find it difficult to find enough things for your kids to do outside. Then maybe going to a co-op like that would be the best thing for you. I hated doing arts and crafts. Like I did not like glitter in my house. And I know that sounds terrible. It doesn't sound like a very good homeschooling mom, but it's the truth. I didn't mind some, and I don't enjoy doing crafts. So guiding my kids through crafts was a frustrating experience for both of us. I usually just gave them the stuff and let them have at it. But what was fun is that this particular co-op, they could try things that I would have never tried with them. At a certain point, some of them even got to do things like pottery and things that I wouldn't have all the stuff to be able to do that. Candle making, they took so many different kinds of things, and it was just a lot of fun for them to be able to pick out their classes. Now, one thing I did do is I told them I get to pick out one. So they had 5 classes total once a week. And I said, you can pick 4, but I get to pick the 5th. So if I felt like they needed to work on something specific, it wasn't always a core subject, but maybe something I felt like they needed exposure to, like maybe piano. I would put them in a piano class. And that was kind of the deal that we had. And so that seemed to work really well. So look for the things that you feel like you're not able to give your kids that you would like to be able to give them. So that would be my suggestion on that. How do you handle people who talk negatively about the way you do school? More relaxed is how we do school. We are not a crafty home or lots of extra projects and stuff. We kind of learn at our own pace. That sounds really familiar, actually, in terms of that's sort of what our days look like as well. We had directed learning in the morning, self-directed learning in the afternoon, and that's when I would be throwing out the kits and the arts and the crafts and all of that and say, here you go, have at it, make what you want. I feel like, I don't know if they're talking to you directly and saying negative things, or talking to other people and saying it to other people. I don't know. I feel like, I don't really owe anybody an explanation as to why I do what I do. I think that can be kind of a big snag for us as homeschooling moms, feeling like we need other people to approve of what we're doing. It's nice if they're supportive, but I think that the more important thing is that you are good with what you're doing with your kids, and that your kids are responding well to what you're doing. Because at the end of the day, that's what really matters. When you're done with this homeschooling journey, are you going to look back and still be concerned about what other people think? Or are you going to look back and go, man, that was awesome. Our kids benefited so much from doing things the way that we felt that they should be done, And I think it's a loyalty to our kids. I think that's an important thing. Maybe look at it like that. Like you're being loyal to your kids and what you believe, that God has laid on your heart for your kids. And so at the end of the day, when it's all said and done, it'll all come out in the wash, as my mom would say. Someday, when all of you, all these moms are at the end of their homeschooling journey, the fruit will be there. And you might have to just be patient and just trust that when that time comes, it'll be evident that it was a good fit for your family. Do you feel it is important in high school to follow what public schools follow credit-wise and what classes are taken? Do you have any good resources for high-functioning special needs kids? Okay. All right. So when it comes to high school, we use the high school credit like just a basic credit, just example, sort of a template, because what that did was it gave my kids an opportunity to meet a goal that I wasn't setting for them. I said, okay, this is, because by the time they were in high school, they were like, hey, I want to earn that diploma, because I sort of prepped them for that. Like when you get into high school, this is going to be your thing. I'm not going to be pushing you, telling you what to do. You're going to earn the diploma. And then I would present, this is what's required to graduate from high school. So let's start with, we're going to need to get math, and you're going to need some language arts, and you're going to need this and that. And so how do we want to approach that? And I would talk about it with them, because there was a lot of different ways that our kids can get credits for things. For instance, our oldest daughter loved working with animals. She had several animals. She spent a lot of time out there. She kept meticulous records. And that was a wonderful way to count towards animal science for her in high school. And then also she ended up with more credits than she needed for that. So it turned into some elective credits. And so we can take our kids' interests and we can fill a lot of those credits through their interests. So if they're like she was interested in animals, she could write a paper on her goats, on milk production in goats, and then all of a sudden now she's also doing her writing assignments. So I do feel like it's important for them to be meeting a standard that's not ours, that we're giving them. It's like, oh no, this is a standard out here that other kids are meeting, and this is how you're going to earn your diploma. Even if I put it together, it's still going to be like a standard for a different organization. And so if we can kind of communicate that to them, that it's these are the goals, and let's talk about how you're going to get there. And so we're teaching them to set goals. We're teaching them to get to those goals in a way that works for them. It gets them owning their education, which is another thing we want them to do. And so that's the beauty of homeschooling through high school. Any good resources for high functioning special needs kids? I don't know if you're talking about in high school or encouragement, or I have one who has been diagnosed with autism, but just in the last several months. I knew from the time he was little, it was the one who had the heart surgery, that he was on the spectrum, but he continued to make progress. And so we just did things the way it worked for him, and he has just continued to make progress. When my kids got into high school, though, there's some really good resources out there. One of my favorites for high school science is the 101 series, and it's biology, it's general science, biology, chemistry, and physics. And it's a homeschool dad who was also a college professor, and so he knows all the important things that they need to know without going overboard and taking it from an approach that's just super friendly and very, very doable. They can do it very independently with not needing a lot of help from us. That would work for a high-functioning special needs kids who is in high school. So that's a good resource. I also love CTC Math. That's another one of my favorites. Marie says, how do you keep from homeschool burnout? I think it's really important to leave margin in your day. I think that is a huge, huge thing. There are a lot of different ways to do that. For our family, that looked like I mentioned earlier, self-directed learning in the morning, or directed learning in the morning and self-directed in the afternoon. So our kids, kindergarten through 8th grade, did not do any formal science or history. They did it all as a sort of a interest-led. Doesn't mean we never read books about science or history. I had them all over the place. We had lots of conversations, but it wasn't something I formally did every day. Sometimes we would take a little side trip and we'd do something science-y or history-related for a few days and just do that instead of our math and language arts. Sometimes we covered those things in more of it in the summertime, but we really, once they got into high school, I knew that, first of all, if you look back at your K through 8 experience, how much science and history do you actually remember? Only the things we're interested in, right? And I'm not saying don't do science and history. I'm saying for our family, I knew that that was the only way that I was going to build any kind of margin into our day. And I think the important thing is to understand that homeschooling shouldn't take all day. And I talk about that a lot in the 4-hour school day. It's important for us as moms to have some time each day where we have time to do some other things besides homeschooling. So I would say really being careful about your outside activities, being really careful about how many things you involve yourself in and how many requirements you're making of yourself and of your kids when it comes to homeschooling. So let's look here. Let's see. Can you speak to activities, especially for your boys, 10 to 12, that occupy their time off formal school hours? So I'm thinking you are talking about the self-directed learning. Well, in the afternoons every day after we had lunch and quiet time, I sent them outside. And we had piles of wood. We had hammers and nails and tarps and all kinds of stuff that just, builds up in your shop or garage or whatever. That's what they would spend a lot of their time on. A lot of times there were things they wanted to build. There were at one point, pretty much all of them were out in these rock croppings, and they had just created this whole society out there, and they were, oh my goodness, it was crazy. They each had their own land. They had law enforcement. They had, certain people were good builders, and so they would build the houses. Because I sent them outside from a pretty early age to play every single day, that was their time every day that they looked forward to. Sometimes they would be pursuing things like their hobbies and their interests. Sometimes it was just a lot of physical stuff. They'd be climbing trees, building bike ramps. Usually it had something to do with creating something. And that's how they spent their time. And it's amazing to watch them now as adults, how many different things they're interested in, how good they are at problem solving, and how much they still love learning, because they went out into that time and it was part of their day, and their brains just learned to work like that. And so I think just a lot of outside stuff is really, really the best thing for our boys. So how did you do the margins with high school? As we go into high school, I'm terrified with the special needs. Okay. I would say, I was very committed to giving them that couple hours every afternoon. So however we had to work the schoolwork to make it so that they had that time in the afternoons, that was crucial. Kids need that. They need that time to pursue their interests, their hobbies. It was a time when in high school they would job shadow. Sometimes they had a job that they would do during that time. And sometimes they were involved in things like drama. But the thing you can do is streamline or merge your subjects. So for instance, if they're reading through their history lesson and they're having to write a short essay or a summary of what they read, you have covered their history and their writing. So we don't have to go into some big, huge writing assignment that day because we've covered writing as part of history. So that's just a small example of some of the things you can do. Again, their interests. How can you turn their interests into a credit? How can you use that interest to earn credit? So if they have something they're interested in, can they write about it? Can they do a presentation about it? It's just, honestly, when it comes down to it, it's really just about getting creative. And for me, it was about a lot of prayer. Ask the Lord for wisdom. Ask Him for direction. He knows our kids better than we do. And I am confident that there is a way to do this. And I think that's the thing you have to, if we go into it fearful and we go into it really assuming that we're going to fail, then it's just going to be it's going to feel like a self-fulfilling prophecy. I think what we need to do is go in and say, there's a way to do this. Be a problem solver. Get the resources you need. Pray about it. And be reasonable about your expectations. Talk to your kids about, like, what does this look like for you? And how can we work together to make this thing happen? So, and I will talk more about that in the high school session that I'll be doing at the conference. All right. Oh, there's a winner. Yay. All right. Congratulations. Ashley Ford Montgomery wins the free copy of the 4-hour school day. Congratulations. I'll be sending that to you. Manders is asking, how did you navigate teaching elementary age children with toddlers running about? My 2-year-old wants to be in the middle of every lesson, and though I try to include her as much as possible, it is still a distraction for my 8-year-old. Okay. So I, at one point had 6 kids 9 and under, 7 kids 11 and under, 8 kids 13 and under. So I get this. It's a balance always. One thing that I did was, now I engaged some of the older kids to help with the younger kids for like 20 minutes at a time. So I don't know if you have any kids in between. Because what I would do is just give them a 20-minute assignment. Hey, here's the 10-year-old. All right, you're going to play with the 2-year-old for 20 minutes. That usually was like the max that I could expect. And I would have them choose an activity that they wanted to do with that little 2-year-old. They could read to them, do Play-Doh with them or whatever, just to give me that 20 minutes to be with one of the other kids. The other thing that I did was bring out toys, rotate toys that were only for school time so that the toddler would not get tired of the toys. And things would be new each day. So that was another thing. I was never opposed to putting them in front of a 20-minute video while I was doing this. And sometimes it comes down to a couple of things. It could come down to, disciplining your 2-year-old to be, if you're going to be here with us, you have to be quiet. And we train them to shush while we're working with the 8-year-old. And the 8-year-old is learning to focus Okay, you need to learn to focus. You can ignore her while you're doing this. I would say use your greatest powers of ignoring. It's like a superhero power, superpower. Excuse me. So there is a way to do it. It's just navigating that. And sometimes, the 2-year-old, I would say, okay, you either need to be quiet and play, or you're going to have to, sit on your bed or be in your crib or whatever. So it's important to have boundaries. It's important that everyone knows this is a purposeful time, and this is what we're working on right now. This teaches our kids self-control. It gives them a routine. And I think that's just important for our kids to know. So let's see. Yes. And I'm not saying it's easy. Please know that. I understand it. And every day can look a little bit different. And because 2-year-olds are definitely a wild card, but I think it's also look for the opportunities. Like, what can you teach the 2-year-old in this particular situation? What can you teach the 8-year-old in this? And how can you dial in maybe some of the older kids to help with the little one? When would you start cursive writing in elementary school, almost second grade? I would just say when they're printing. When you feel like they're printing pretty well, you can move them into cursive. Now, our youngest has dysgraphia, and so the recommendation for him was to actually just don't bother teaching him block, because spacing and all of that was just not a thing for him. It was really hard for him. It was easier for him to write in cursive, and he literally did cursive for years. He did it all the way through. He's done it all the way through high school, just because he struggles so much with being able to write neatly. So they had us dive in like right away when he started writing any of his letters and numbers. But if that's not a problem for you, I would say get them writing in, regular print block style first, uppercase and lowercase, and then you can move into cursive. So, all right, dysgraphia and dyslexia, yes, those are challenging things, but not impossible for sure. Let's see if there's any other questions here. We're getting ready to wrap up our time together. So if you have a quick question, go ahead and throw it in the comments. But again, I am looking so forward to being at this conference. It's the first time I've been to Midwest Parent Educators, and I'm super excited to be there. I'm really hoping, I know that you all will walk away so encouraged and so uplifted from this conference. I have been talking to some of the team there, and they just have such a heart for all of you. And so I guarantee you this is going to be a great place for you to be. I hope you'll invite your friends there as well. Any high school friendly reading for dyslexia kids? I cannot answer that question, because as far as I know, none of my kids are dyslexic. I think the one might have been, but we just never were diagnosed. So I don't want to pretend that I know something that I don't, and I really don't have any suggestions for that. I do have a friend who teaches. She has all kinds of online resources for homeschooling dyslexics. From way little all the way through high school. She had, I think, 7 out of her 8 kids are dyslexic. It's Marianne Sunderland, and she's wonderful. So if you need a good resource for that, she would have book lists. She would have all kinds of things to help you out. Marianne Sunderland is her name. Any tips if you've never been to a conference that I haven't started homeschooling yet? Okay. Yes, actually, I do have tips for you. I'm going to warn you that you're going to walk into the vendor hall and you're probably going to be completely overwhelmed. I'm overwhelmed, and I've been doing this for 28 years. So my suggestion is go in there, and maybe the first time through, or even the first day, don't buy anything. Go through and just look at things, talk to people. You can't do everything, right? You've got to make, one choice for each kid, or maybe one choice for several kids. Keep your priorities intact. Know why you're there. What are you there to purchase? What are you there to consider? What direction do you feel like you're going? And look for those kinds of resources. And then, oh gosh, just pick the conference titles that feel like they're going to be the ones that align with your mission for homeschooling. If you know why you're homeschooling, and do you need encouragement for yourself as a mom to be encouraged that you can do this? Do you need a little more information on homeschooling a certain age? Pick something with that, or maybe you need a combination of those things. So yeah, just be intentional about the sessions that you go to, and of course, you can always get access to the ones you couldn't go to, which is another fantastic thing about conferences is they record all the sessions, and you can have access to them later if you want. Just enjoy yourself, get to know some people. I always find families at homeschooling conferences to be super friendly and very welcoming and supportive. And so I think you'll have a blast. Just enjoy it. Just sit back and enjoy it. All right. Let's see if there's anything else. Yeah, Bonnie, there is a conference schedule. I think it was actually posted a little bit earlier here, and she might go ahead and share that with you as well. But I appreciate you guys being here today, and I do hope to see you at the conference. It's just a couple of weeks away, so close. So invite your friends and come meet me at my table, or come see me at the sessions. I'd love to meet you and be able to get to know you a little bit. All right. Awesome. Okay, well, thank you guys for being here. And again, I look forward to seeing you later this month and meeting you in person. So thanks for being here.